two young African leaders from two West African countries with similar history, people, culture, and colonial past. Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso and newly elected Bassirou Faye of Senegal are dynamic pan-Africanist leaders who have similar visions for their countries in Africa. In this video, we are going to look at how Ibrahim Traore and Bassirou Faye are planning to work together for the good and sovereignty of their people. Before we continue, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the new tourist channel to get all updates on Bassirou Faye and Ibrahim Traore. Also, let us know in the comments that you want Senegal's new president to work closely with Ibrahim Traore. In recent years, former French colonies, especially in Western Africa, have been rising against French oppression, exploitation, and parasitic policies. These uprisings resulted from coups spearheaded by revolutionary leaders who have the interests of their people. We have seen Ibrahim Traore from Burkina Faso, Assimi Goita from Mali, Mamady Doumbouya from Guinea and Abdoulrahmane Chiani from Niger. The most recent actor is Senegal's newly democratically elected 44-year-old pan-Africanist president, Bassirou Faye, who was sworn into office early last week. Faye's rise to the presidency was a rough one. He went from tax inspector to political prisoner, then to the Senegalese presidency where he has taken a sovereign stance and chosen to put the people of Senegal first. Captain Ibrahim Traore, head of Burkina Faso, sent his congratulations to Mr. Bassirou Faye, hailing him as the symbol of a new era for an uninhibited, free, and sovereign Africa. This statement comes after the swearing-in of Bassirou Faye as the fifth president of the Republic of Senegal, an event which marked the start of a new era for the country. In his remarks, Captain Ibrahim Traore expresses his admiration for the newly inaugurated president, considering him as a catalyst for change for an entire continent. By calling it a symbol of an uninhibited, free, and sovereign Africa, Traore highlights the importance of strong and visionary leadership for the emancipation and progress of Africa. Furthermore, by declaring his willingness to cooperate with Bassirou Faye for the renovation of sub-regional and international cooperation, the head of the Burkinabe military regime displays his commitment to constructive collaboration between African nations, essential to advance common interests, and address regional and global challenges. This declaration highlights the importance of inter-African relations and regional cooperation in promoting peace, stability, and development on the continent. It also highlights the crucial role that Africa's new leaders can play in transforming their countries and the region as a whole. Ibrahim Traore's words reflect the hope and optimism for a better future for Africa, embodied by the presidency of Bassirou Faye. They demonstrate the desire for cooperation and partnership between African nations to address common challenges and realize the full potential of the continent. Acclaimed as Senegal's Messiah, Faye has promised to lead Senegal to sovereignty and liberate the country from Western oppression and exploitation. Many West Africans have been looking at collaborations between Faye and other revolutionary leaders like Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, Assimi Goita of Mali, and Abdoulrahmane Chiani of Niger. All these leaders have the same vision. We have a video on our channel that shows that there's a possibility that Senegal could form a confederation with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. One of Faye's promises was to purge the colonial currency used in West Africa, the CFA franc. This plan falls in line with the plans that Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali had in February when they mentioned that they are making plans to ditch the colonial CFA franc currency. Footage purporting to show President Faye has been widely shared across social media, with captions claiming he has told France to leave us alone. In the video, a man speaking in English says,
"It is high time for France to lift its knee off our neck and put an end to this unjust oppression. Centuries of misery, human trafficking, colonization, and neocolonization have caused immeasurable suffering. It's time to put an end to this cycle of oppression. It's high time for France to leave us alone."
We have seen videos in the past where Ibrahim Traore has uttered similar words since taking power. One of his speeches that stands out is his submission during the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg last year. Now, let us look at one peculiar area where these two leaders could have much to work on: the colonial currency, the CFA franc. At no point in history has the CFA franc, the colonial currency used in West and Central African countries belonging to the franc zone, been closer to its demise. Senegal under outgoing President Macky Sall was a pillar of the long-standing French attempt to remain influential among its former colonies named Francafrique. Now newly elected Faye, under the moniker of left pan-Africanism, has vowed to make his country more sovereign in food, energy, and finance. Never before have 4 West African governments, including one of the regional leaders, Senegal, been simultaneously eager and ready to get out of the neo-colonial stranglehold of the CFA franc. Historically, serious attempts at leaving the CFA franc since its inception in 1948 have been sabotaged by France. For example, Guinea was flooded by counterfeit banknotes when it left the CFA franc in the 1960s. Mali was put under pressure to rejoin the CFA franc after its departure in 1967. It returned into the fold in 1984. In 2011, Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo, who had been considering pulling out of the CFA franc, was made to step down after controversial elections with the help of a military intervention force. He was then sent to the International Criminal Court before being acquitted 10 years later. France went further in 2011, a case countries wanting to make the next attempt at leaving the CFA franc should be cognizant of. It used its seat on the Central Bank of West African States' decision-making bodies to block Ivory Coast from being refinanced by the bank. Leaving the CFA franc has thus historically come with a high risk of French sabotage. But the constellation of forces has shifted and West African governments can better prepare this time. If they join forces, and Ivory Coast votes for a less France-dependent president in the presidential elections in 2025, like Senegal has done, then the end of the West African CFA franc may indeed be near. Now, let us go back to President Bassirou Diomaye Faye. Before we do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the New Tourist channel, and share the video with all your family and friends. President Faye's election program had a roadmap towards leaving the CFA franc and setting up a national currency. Among the key steps are creating a national central bank, refinancing of state expenditure at 0%, demonetizing gold and preventing its import and export to build up a gold reserve, repatriating gold reserves still stored in Paris and all over the world, reprofiling public debt and canceling private debt through monetary fiat, installing a deposit insurance scheme for small savers, building a national stock exchange. Leaders of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali have similar plans too. The rise of Faye could make this plan come to life. Mr. Faye has vowed to renegotiate all contracts that his country has with foreign entities. For example, the Sangomar oil project off the coast of Senegal that is 82% owned by Australian company Woodside Energy, while Senegal only has 18%, would most probably be renegotiated under Faye's regime. We do not need to remind you of the similar steps that Ibrahim Traore and Abdoulrahmane Chiani have taken against foreign corporations since taking power in their countries. Niger stopped the sale of gold to French companies that were exploiting it, while Burkina Faso stopped the sale of gold at ridiculously low prices. A common currency in these West Africa countries could support this shift in focus towards the well-being of the West African people. This is because its logic would be to reorient the governments towards the domestic economy and its people. Imports and easy repatriation of earnings by foreign corporations, which are some of the main effects of the often overvalued CFA franc, would become more difficult. Overall, Senegal and the Sahel governments are in a stronger position globally than ever before. The African continent is seen as essential to ensure the energy transition in Europe, as well as its diversification of oil and gas supply. And Western military, diplomatic, and trade hegemony on the continent is being challenged by China and Russia, as well as Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Turkey. If Senegal and the Sahel governments position the end of the CFA franc well in their overall negotiations with their international partners, as well as their domestic capitalist class and opposing political forces, its end may indeed be near. That will not be the end of the long road towards food, energy, and overall economic sovereignty to the benefit of the people. But it will be an important symbolic and material victory against post-colonial interference and meddling. The colonial CFA franc has outlived its usefulness for today's left Pan-Africanism. Organizing the end of neo-colonialism is a sizable challenge, but for the first time in decades, is one that can be confronted head-on. Indeed, Africans have had enough. Should Ibrahim Traore and Bassirou Faye work close together? Let us know what you think in the comments. Also, do not forget to subscribe to the New Tourist channel for more updates on Africa.